So now that we've written our code to work out whether a number is prime or not, we're going to build the app itself. And as always, this is going to be a challenge for you. So do your best to build it handedly, but don't feel bad if you need to follow along for some or even all of the video. The important thing is to give it a go and try your best. So here is our simulator. Oh, you can see I'm trying out some values already. So we've got a title. This time I'm using a placeholder to instruct the user what to do into the text view. And then we've got our button and our result label as we've seen before. So now it was very simple. If I put in a 5, it tells me it is prime. If I put in 597, it's not prime. If I put in 4, it's not prime as well. But this time we also get a nice error message. So if I don't put anything in, then it says, please enter a positive whole number. Similarly, if I put in 3 in characters, for example, I get that error message as well. I have to put in a proper whole number as digits to get a result. It's impossible to crash this app. Moreover, I've also applied auto layout to this app so it looks good in both landscape and portrait. So I want you to apply that as well from what you've learned from a couple of videos ago. And I'll press Command right to get us back into portrait orientation. So best of luck. Start, of course, with a new project. I hope it goes well. All right, here we go then. I hope you managed to do most of that yourself, but I'm going to start, of course, with File, New Project. And as usual, we'll go for Single View Application. And I'll call it isItPrime, and I'll avoid the question mark again. And save it on the desktop. And then we'll start over in Main Storyboard. And this is where we'll add our labels and everything else. And it's also where we'll set up our constraints and auto layout. So let's have our central title label. isItPrime? Make it a little bigger. And center as usual. And I'm going to fix the top constraint so the distance from the top of the screen is fixed. Set the width and height. And also center it horizontally in the container. Excellent. Next, I'm going to add a text field. And this one, I'm going to stretch out to the very edge of the screen. And I'm going to set the constraints to be top, left, and right margins, which means it will be aligned to the isItPrime label, and it will be at that distance from the edge of the screen regardless of screen size. And then I just need to set the height as my 4th constraint. There we go. All looking good. And to keep our user interface super clean and tidy, I'm going to add a placeholder, enter a number to see if it is prime. There we go. So I could have had that as a separate label, but actually it works pretty well as a placeholder in the text field. Next, we're going to bring in a button, which will ask the question, is it prime? And again, we'll set the top constraint, width, and height. And we'll also set the alignment as horizontal in the container. And finally, we'll bring in our label, which I'll stretch to the edge again, center the text, set the top, left and right constraints, and set the height to be fixed. Great. So let's have a quick look. Does it look good in other orientations? It certainly does. Everything is where we want it to be. Smaller screen sizes work great. Bigger screen sizes. Now the text field is perhaps a little large on the iPad, but that is at least doing what we told it to. So I'm happy with the auto layout. Now let's bring in our assistant editor to create our IB actions and IB outlets. So first off, I'm control dragging there to just underneath where it says class view controller. And we'll call this the number text field. Then control dragging from the button. I'll call it isItPrime, and that's going to be an action. And then we'll have, as we've had before, the result label. There we go. And I'll get rid of the text there until we add it in. Wonderful. So now we can get rid of the assistant editor, go back over to viewcontroller.swift and write our code. So the first thing we need to do is to get the value of the text field and attempt to convert it to an integer. So let user entered integer equal number text field dot text, and we're going to try to convert that to an integer. And actually it's asking us to force unwrap the number text field dot text field itself, which normally I would be quite happy to do because we know that this is a text field, so it will definitely have a value even if that value is an empty string. So if the user doesn't type anything in there, it's still just going to be an empty string. So normally I'd be happy to do that, but because we've just looked at optionals and better ways to unwrap them, I'm going to be a bit more careful than usual and do an if let, and we'll call this user entered string, and we'll set that equal to number text field dot text, and only if that works will we attempt to convert user entered string to an integer. So we're being super careful here. I would normally be very happy to force unwrap this, but this is being very careful and there's no chance of a crash in there at all. Okay, now let's carry on and see if this conversion to an integer has worked. So again, we'll use if let, and this time I'm going to use number to be equal to user entered integer. So if we get to here, we've definitely got a number that we can work with. If we don't, then this time I'm going to give a little error message to the user. So we'll set result label dot text to say, please enter a positive whole number. There we go. If they have entered a positive whole number though, then let's bring in our code. So we don't need to define the number this time because we already have it. So let's paste that in. And now that should do the check on their number. And we can finally look to see if is prime, then we'll set the result label text to be the number is prime. And if it's not, we'll set the result label text to be number is not prime. I don't think that's quite deserving of an exclamation mark, so I'm going to leave it as is. Okay, let's switch over to the iPhone 6s simulator and take a look. So we're being really careful here. We're checking to see whether the number text field has a text value, which we're pretty certain that it does. Then we're checking to see if we can convert the user entered string to an integer here. And this one I'm not so sure about, because the user may well have entered a letter or something completely different. So if they have done that, we're going to send them a message asking them to enter a positive whole number. And if they haven't, then we're going to go through the process and work out whether their number is prime. Okay, let's take a look. So let's play the game first and try, for example, a 6. Is it prime? 6 is not prime. Correct. What about 61? 61 is prime. Also correct. 19 is prime. Excellent. So we're looking good. Let's just try what happens if I put in an empty value. Then we get this message. Brilliant. If I put in a 1, I get correctly 1 is not prime. And then if I type in the number 3 like that, I get please enter a positive whole number. Wonderful. So that's exactly how we wanted this app to work. It's pretty simple and pretty basic, but it uses a lot of the skills that we learned in this section. And it could be useful to a schoolboy or schoolgirl working out prime numbers in a maths lesson. But that takes us then to the end of this section. I hope you've enjoyed it, and you'll be pleased to hear that we're going to spend the rest of our time in Xcode, and specifically in the next section we'll be looking at some of the more advanced features like timers, tables, permanent data storage, controlling the keyboard, and we'll be finishing up with completely working versions of a to-do list app and a what's the weather app. So there's a lot to learn. I look forward to seeing you for it in the next section.